Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your questions, hot takes, observations, ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. I collected over 100 on the YouTube post mainly, also some on the Discord community. Link to that is in the description. I'm going to catch up on Discord comments because I think I missed it last time around. I'm recording this midway through the National Bank Open quarterfinals. I think by the time this posts, the quarters will be over and we'll have semis set. Doing this mailbag a little bit later than I thought, but honestly, the entire schedule, part of that is because I've been on the commentary hamster wheel, but also the entire schedule of this tournament has just felt very foreign. And a little more on that, because of this Thursday final, I'm in a weird position this week just for content, because I scheduled, and this was months and months and months ago, before I had a really close look at the calendar. I am going to North Carolina on Thursday night. I think I'll watch the men's final on a plane on my way to North Carolina to see some college friends. And I thought I was in the clear when we made these plans. Obviously, leaving on a Thursday, you don't think that you're going to be conflicting with the final. Little did I know, the final is on Thursday. And the more I think about it, when I started this podcast 6 years ago, the programming schedule was pretty simple, pretty foolproof. We're going to do Monday match analysis, where we break down the final on the previous Sunday. And then we're going to do a second podcast every week, which will be either a draw preview, if a big tournament is coming up, or it'll be a mailbag. And that's our 2 a week. And it used to be very easy to kind of get into that rhythm throughout 90% of the calendar, and it was like sort of on autopilot. Things have changed so much. So much. It's not like that anymore. That's not the rhythm of the tour anymore. And we'll talk more about that because I think there are going to be some comments about that topic. All right, let's get into the comments. This was the top comment. Did you watch the Nothing Major podcast with Zverev? And if so, what were your thoughts? I'd especially love to hear your takes on Zverev admitting, well, let's just go one by one. First of all, I did watch this podcast. Thank you for this comment, which ended up being the top comment, because I know I've said this before. I am horrible at listening to other tennis podcasts. When I open my Spotify app and put on a podcast, I'm usually trying actively to unplug from tennis. So I am really bad at getting myself to listen to tennis podcasts. It just has to do with my own media diet and my own habits. But I did listen. I didn't watch, I listened. Okay, let's go point by point. Zverev admitting that the Australian Open final loss to Sinner crushed him and that it has somewhat derailed his season so far, as he went into it confident and thinking that it would be the one time he would finally win a slam. Well, I didn't know that he was feeling so confident coming in. That was new information to me. The fact that it crushed him and that it somewhat derailed his season so far, that a lot of what Zverev said about his season 2025, whether it be the schedule and playing in February and the effect that drubbing in the Australian Open final may have played, none of that was surprising to me. In fact, I had said it all at the time, so it was more of a confirmation that I was actually on the right track, reading the tea leaves from the outside. When Zverev started to struggle in February and March and to some extent April, and I was looking at the circumstances, one of them they didn't cover on the podcast, but looking at the circumstances of the psychological toll of that final, the absolutely packed zero rest schedule that he decided to put himself through, and the pressure of trying to become number one with the Sinner suspension. And that's the one thing that he did not mention and he was not asked about. All those three things combined, I was like, wait, we're supposed to be surprised that he's not playing well right now? I mean, I certainly wasn't. I said it at the time. So it was just sort of affirmation of that I was on the right track there. Definitely interesting to hear it from Zverev himself. The fact that Rafa apparently went out of his way to spend a lot of time with him, as well as Tony on the training block, including showing him how to hit forehands in public restaurants at 1 a.m. Look, I thought this was great detail, that Rafa coaches with intensity and the same kind of passion that he played with. And that he told him, well, let's go to the next one here. The other point, Rafa thinks that Zverev can win a slam not only if he becomes more brave. Rafa thinks that Zverev can win a slam, but only if he becomes more brave and aggressive in the big moments. Zverev says he already knew this, but hearing it from Nadal felt different. However, can we really expect Zverev to take this to heart and adapt in this way, considering someone just as esteemed in Federer has already said the same thing? Thanks, love your videos. The source of the information does matter, okay? Especially when your coach is your dad and your coach on tour has been your same coach for your entire career. The source of the information matters a lot. And I'll make a parallel here. Darren Cahill, after Sinner beat Djokovic, other way around. Djokovic beat Sinner in straights at Wimbledon a few years ago. Darren went to Novak and said, hey, Novak, do you mind sharing some thoughts on Jannik's game? We'll get them to Jannik. I think he'll really appreciate that. And Novak said, yes, his ball is the same every time. He needs to play with more variety. So Darren was able to then go back to Jannik and say, look, here's what Novak said. Not necessarily things that Jannik hadn't ever heard before, but coming from Novak, it means something different. Same dynamic here. Having that Rafa in his head, that means something. That said, he's got to do it because he's known this. This isn't new information. What I found most interesting, though, is that Rafa had some technical ideas, clearly. We talk about the restaurant at 2 a.m. We talk about them kind of going to work just on the forehand. And Rafa clearly said, look, I think we can do this, we can do that, and we can get a little bit more out of that forehand to shore it up and give it something extra. That is what intrigues me most out of all this. So yeah, it was a great interview. Nice job by the Nothing Major guys. And yeah, I do recommend. What are your top 5 current rivalries across all sports? And where would you rank Sinner Alcaraz on your list? It's always hard for me to compare tennis to other sports because I engage with tennis so differently than other sports. But I'd really like to think that Sinner and Alcaraz are on that list. Their matches have been just awesome on a consistent basis. They're, now that they've played in major finals, that was kind of the missing piece in their rivalry. The fact that they did it across the channel double now, and it's been an unpredictable rivalry, and it's been back and forth, and it's been nuanced and layered. And there's a pretty good contrast there. Obviously, there's not bad blood, but it really has been as good as tennis from a neutral standpoint. It's been as good as you could ever want it to be. And by the way, that didn't take very long to happen because they're both still so young. So I think that's got to get on the top 5. What are others? I'm not going to make a list. I can't rank them. But certainly Yankees, Red Sox, maybe Maple Leafs, Bruins. Although, I don't know if that's on a top 5. That's borderline. Duke, North Carolina in college basketball. Michigan, Ohio State in college football. Ravens, Steelers, I think is the best NFL rivalry. They always play tight. There's a lot of juice in that rivalry. I feel like Verstappen Hamilton has cooled off a little bit. I know that McLaren has been the dominant force in F1 so far in 2025, and I only loosely follow F1, but I don't think Verstappen Hamilton is a thing anymore, if I'm not mistaken. I don't follow soccer, so it's hard for me to really include that stuff. But what's the best rivalry in soccer? Is it Barcelona, Real Madrid? Or is it, I don't know, is it Chelsea. I don't even know what would it be in Premier League. Like, sorry, I don't want to misspeak. I don't want to speak out of turn. I have some guesses, but yeah, I'm gonna keep it to myself. What else am I missing? Is there a big rivalry in golf? Not really. Certainly, there's no good rivalry right now in MMA, which is a problem for the sport. There's no good boxing rivalry right now. Yeah, NBA. I guess I didn't name an NBA rivalry, but yeah, you can say like Lakers Celtics, but there hasn't been like a Lakers Celtics NBA Finals in a long time. So yeah, those are kind of what come to mind. Oh, I've got a good one. How about Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese? Huh? A little bit of a clickbaity one in there. Why not? Next one from Stan. Hey, Gil, what are your thoughts on the declining usage of the slice backhand as a weapon? Not that many players use the slice to approach on their own terms, and few use it effectively to change the pace. Do you attribute this decline to changing court surfaces and speeds, racket technology, or something else? Thanks for the great content. I attribute this, first of all, this comment didn't get a lot of likes, but I wanted to make sure to get it in because I feel like it's underlooked. It's underlooked how many players basically don't use the slice anymore. And I looked at the top 10. It's basically half the top 10 because Sinner doesn't like to slice. Zverev, Fritz, Draper, Runa. Basically half the top 10 is not going to just slice a neutral backhand. Then the guys who will, Musetti obviously, De Minaur has started to, Shelton certainly will, Djokovic will, depending on the matchup. So you'll really see Djokovic use it if he's playing like Medvedev or Zverev, but then against other players, he'll put it away. But that certainly counts. And then Alcaraz will. Again, Carlos, it depends what kind of mood he's in, right? And what surface he's playing on. So all these things can be taken into account. But the reason slice has gone away, not gone away, sorry, that's an exaggeration. The reason slice has declined in usage is because of modern levels of topspin and runaround footwork and how big forehands are nowadays. The problem with hitting a slice backhand cross court is against most players, if you hit it too central or if you don't get enough bite on it and it becomes a forehand, you've just hit a shot that is going to get attacked because of how good players are at using the runaround footwork and then how good the weight of shot generation is on the forehand, where even from low contact points, because of how much RPMs they get on the ball, they can bring it up and down quickly, achieve good ball speed, generate all of their own power. And essentially, a runaround forehand against a slice backhand is bad news for whoever hit the slice backhand. And I think that's a big reason why they've gone away. But I think the other aspect of it is all the players that I just mentioned, particularly a guy like Zverev, a guy like Fritz, and if Medvedev and Rublev were still in the top 10, you'd throw them in there. Their backhands from below knee level, they hit great backhands from low. And that's why they don't really need to slice. I think there used to be a lot of players, and I relate to this on a personal level. I really don't understand how these guys hit such great two-handed backhands from below knee level. It doesn't make any sense to me, at least. Like, I can't feel that at all because I know I have a two-handed backhand. I don't like to talk about myself much at all, but I think it's okay when I'm saying, like, I'm blown away by these guys. I'm blown away by how well they hit low backhands because I always feel like I have to slice if the ball's below my knees. And that used to be pretty common to see where players would slice out of necessity. But how good are Zverev and Fritz and those guys at going down low and hitting good drive backhands? They are so good at that. Next one is from member Nathan. As we head into the US Open, which is notoriously hot and humid, I'm curious, do you have any experience playing in that kind of heat yourself? And if so, what does it affect / what tends to suffer first? Is it more of a physical detriment / does your ability to get air and maintain your cardio get really messed up? Or is it more of a factor with your decision-making and shot selection? Well, those two things are related. Like, your physical condition is always going to be one of the main things that affect your shot selection. Look at this. I guess I'm going to talk about myself again. Yeah, I have plenty of experience playing in the heat and the humidity because I grew up in New York, and I've played a good amount in Florida, which makes New York look comfortable in the summer. And the main thing that I always found, if you're not used to it, especially, so like if I went down to Florida before it got super humid in New York and I played there, it feels as if you are never able to, like, it feels like your breaths are 50% breaths. Like, you're sucking air and you can't catch up. It's a horrible feeling. It feels like, and I don't know what the science is behind it, but it just feels like every breath you take, you're not getting as much air as you want. It's like you're sucking water or something. And I found that if it normally takes you 15 seconds to recover cardiovascularly, and you're not used to the humidity, it might take you in that extra 15 seconds. And that's, to me, always been the most uncomfortable thing about playing in humidity is the cardio, the way it just kills your cardio. The other thing, this never bothered me as much. You sweat way more in humid conditions. So you lose more fluid, you lose more water, makes you more susceptible to cramping, and it can drain you a little bit more. I never had a problem with that. Like, I would never just, and maybe that's just because I didn't cramp. So, I mean, I've cramped before, but it was rare. So I don't know. I mean, but that's certainly an aspect of it too, is just sweating more. Next one from Decapod Bruiser. Why does the ATP/WTA not realize what everyone else sees as obvious? The 12-day Masters is hurting their product. If they want to attract more casual fans, the semifinal and finals need to be on the weekend. The 12-day events burn out the top players and give lower-ranked players less opportunities to earn a living. Alternate the weeks between the ATP and WTA for these events. For example, the ATP plays Indian Wells and the WTA plays Miami, and then switch the next week. That way, the venues have their precious 2 weekends of tennis, and it loosens up the schedule. Masters should be a 64-player draw, 6 rounds over 7 days, and no buys. I could go on forever about this. Great podcast, and keep up the good work. Thank you. Excellent comment. And I like the idea that you actually come with a solution. So I'll talk about the solution. Very interesting. But first, let's start with the premise of this comment, which is that 12-day Masters are hurting the product. I agree with it. I've been thinking long and hard about, well, what is it? Like, why do these feel like sometimes they don't have the juice? Like, they're not as captivating as they used to be. Part of it is momentum and pacing. You don't have the compact nature of a tournament that is progressing quickly. It's slower. It's almost like, it's like a major, because majors are even longer than the Masters 1000s. So it's like a major with the big draws and the days off in between matches. But majors have earned the right to supersize the format because they are so big and important. Whereas these 1000 events, they almost feel like slam cosplay. They are watered down majors. They are slam light. And now you have this situation where the product, the majors and the Masters, they used to feel very different, and there were aspects of the Masters that were exciting and fun. They were almost like, this in its own right, this product in its own right, offers some things that the slams don't even offer. These little draws where you have great matchups right away. You don't have to wait a couple rounds to get matchups between top 30 players. You get them quickly. And you have a fast pace format. 5 matches in a row, in and out. That was fun and exciting. The tour had its own distinct product from the slams that in some ways were superior. Now, in what way is the Toronto or the National Bank Open, in what way is the Western and Southern Open in Cincinnati superior to a major tournament? Can you name one thing where it's better? It's just worse. There is no redeeming quality of this compared to what we get at a slam, where, again, that used to exist. It used to be its own thing that was cool in its own right. Now it's just a watered down, inferior version of a major. And you just have that, I think, an overall fatigue as we go through the calendar of these constant 1000s and drawn out longer events. And the players hate it. The players have never had less time off. The calendar has never felt more demanding for the players because these off days are not restful. At the end of the day, they're still at a tournament, preparing and waiting for their next match. It's like the whole year now, they're at a tournament. They feel like they're always at a tournament. And it's burning them out. And that's the universal feedback. But undoubtedly, and this is where it gets tricky, there is never going to be a world in which a 12-day event doesn't make more money than a 7-day event. You're never going to find that. You're always going to get more. Even if the product is inferior, you are always going to make more money out of a 12-day event compared to a 1-week event. So the business logic that led to this decision, the One Vision plan from Andrea Gaudenzi, it made sense from a financial standpoint. And I think what it's felt like to the players and what it's felt like to the fans, I actually do give the tours the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that they foresaw that. I don't think they knew when they were making this change. They knew that they were going to make more money from it. I don't think they knew that it would be so unpopular among the players and the fans. I really didn't. Now that it has been, though, we're left with a lot of comments like this one and just pondering, what's it going to take? What's it going to take to go back? Now, there's no doubt that it's going to take a lot to reverse this. It's going to take a lot because, legally speaking, in terms of all the contracts, the potentially binding legal contracts that have been put in place in order to make all these changes around the calendars, unwinding all of that is daunting. And making any decision that is going to affect the bottom line negatively, that's also daunting in its own right. But there has to be a threshold, and I honestly believe there is a threshold that exists. And I don't know what that threshold is, but there has to be one of negative player and fan feedback to which they find a way to figure this out and make it better for everybody. I genuinely have to believe that that threshold is there somewhere. That if players continue to voice their displeasure, fans continue to voice their displeasure, and I feel like I've done my part on this show. I have never supported this. Actually, that's not true. When it was first announced, I thought it was a good idea. I was wrong. I just wasn't right. I was wrong. But as soon as I've sort of been able to figure out where this is going and what it's doing, what the effect has been, I've been against this, and I'll continue to be against it. Now, the players probably have more power than certainly the media and the fans. But the players also need to really look themselves in the mirror and consider if they are willing to take a pay cut to make this happen for them. If they want the calendar to be shortened, and if that includes axing these 12-day Masters, again, I think we've established that economically there is not a world in which you can make the same amount of money in 7 days that you can in 12. There just isn't. So are the players willing to deal with the consequences of calendar reform? The financial consequences. Because I think usually the way it goes and the way it's gone, and the reason why I believe the Players' Council was on board with this change to 12-day Masters when it was first being figured out. I don't recall any players protesting this at first, because this plan was packaged as an increase in prize money. That's how this was presented and packaged to the players, and they said yes. And I have yet to see anything presented to the players that includes or is headlined by an increase in prize money that the players have not immediately signed off on. I have not ever seen the players say, I know that we'd make more money this way, but you know what? No thanks, because we don't think it would be best in terms of load on the body and calendar and all that stuff. So difficult decisions for the players. You don't get it both ways. They have to come to grips with that. If they got to decide, do they want more money or do they want calendar reform? They are not going to get both. We all want less work and more money. Usually we have to choose. This is an interesting solution, though, in the comment to split it up, to have men and women sort of flip-flop. Yes, this would achieve 12 days or 2 weeks for the venues, for the tournaments, but you got to keep in mind that the tours want the 12 days. So the ATP Tour wants 24 days out of Rome and Madrid. And under the One Vision plan and the contracts for media and sponsors that they have put in place, getting 24 days out of those two tournaments are part of it. Getting 24, 25 days out of Canada and Cincinnati, that's what the ATP is looking for. So if you just look at it from a tournament venue standpoint, your solution works. But if you look at it in the holistic picture, and remember, it was never the tournaments asking for this, it was the tours. That's where this solution of splitting up the men and the women does fall apart. Plus, I think it would be kind of a shame because the experience of these events are better when men and women are at the events at the same time. And obviously, you can do combined events. You don't need 12 days to do, let me just add this. You don't need 12 days to do combined events at a single venue. You could do a 1 week 1,000 mixed or both tours in 7 days with smaller draws. All you get is great matches on the outer courts and a product that is basically like on fire, like absolutely banging for 7 days in a row. That's what you get. So is that maximizing the profit potential? Maybe not. But is it maximizing the entertainment value of the product? Yes, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. I'm going to try to not go that long on any of these other ones as we keep it moving here. This one is from Fachan's 680. Sinner's return ability has been highly lauded, including by players like Djokovic. That certainly means something, and I'd be the last person to suggest he isn't a great returner. However, he sits between a 28 to 29% break rate over full seasons, including last year, where his form was tremendous. Those are not numbers to scoff at, but notably, this isn't even as high as Carlos's break rate, someone I don't often see discussed as one of the absolute best returners in the game, although this is maybe unfair. It's certainly a far cry from some of the numbers that Murray and Djokovic could deliver in their primes. It may seem unfair to compare Sinner stats to a 2011 Djokovic, who is at a 38.8% break rate, but he has reached a level where he's earned those sorts of comparisons. What is your take on the Sinner return? To me, he's a well-rounded returner off of both wings, and he has the ground game to back it up. But I can't say I'm floored by what he can do on the return from the eye test. Watching Murray neutralized first serves on surfaces like grass actually felt inhuman at times. Him stepping into the second serve return on his backhand is iconic. Djokovic's return needs no explanation. And while I think it's possible that someone could have GOAT contending return that slips under the radar of the eye test, it's not like Sinner's return stats are miraculously high. His hold stats, on the other hand, I'm likely setting the bar too high here, but I'm curious your thoughts anyway. Here's how I would explain these numbers. The reason why Sinner is not on par with Djokovic and Murray on the return might have something to do with the return of serve itself, but I think it has more to do with defense. It has been said many times, and versions of this have been said on this very show, that Sinner is a version of Djokovic with more power, which almost makes it sound like Jannik Sinner is this holistically improved version of Novak Djokovic. That leaves out a pretty key aspect, which is that Sinner does not have really anything near the scrambling ability of Novak Djokovic, the defensive scrambling ability of Novak Djokovic, which is so often essential if you're going to win return points. I mean, it is a big part of winning return points. It is, if you're doing everything right, it is not a very big part of winning service points. If you've hit an effective serve, something has gone terribly wrong if you're having to scramble defensively in order to win serve points, right? Something has gone wrong. Whereas on return, it's part of it. It's a big part of it. Murray and Djokovic are two of the best defenders ever. That's baked into that number big time. Sinner defends well. Sinner certainly, out of the corners, hits exceptionally big. And I think his non-emergency defense, like his more, I guess his on-the-run play is great. Like, exceptional, actually. But I think once he's pulled out of range, when he's actually in emergency situations and he's in losing positions, is his ability to hang in points, turn around points, is it on par with Murray and Djokovic? No. And to me, that explains the number more so than the return, because I think that Sinner's return itself, I do think it's at least close. I've always loved Sinner's return. I think similar to Djokovic, he does a great job at driving over the ball at end range. He's got elasticity and flexibility in the way he's able to launch his body at the ball and maintain balance on the return. Obviously, on the second serve return, he can rush you deep up the middle no matter where you serve. I think he's good at handling the body serve as well on the second serve return. Maybe his block returning and chip returning, I would say it's not on an Andy Murray level, which especially on grass and on quicker surfaces, it allowed Andy to just hit awesome neutralizing block returns whenever he was forced to return with a continental grip. But I really think this is more about defense and less about the return of serve itself. It's very difficult to separate those two things, but it's essential to separate those two things. Just like it's essential to say, okay, let's say Iga Swiatek leads the WTA Tour in hold rate, and usually she's up there. I actually don't think she's leading the tour right now, but usually she's up there. But it's very obvious that she hasn't a solid serve, but she does not have among the best serves on the WTA Tour. And why is that? It's because we are separating the serve itself from the ability to win service points and ultimately service games. And I think on the return, the same thing is necessary. And for the record, Iga is third in the last 52 weeks, behind only Rybakina and Osaka. Like, look at these names. Rybakina, Osaka, Swiatek, Sabalenka, Noskova, Keys. I mean, Swiatek's serve is not as good as the players around her. She's up there because she's so good at following it up. Next one from Cohen. Hi, Gill. This stretch has been difficult for Alcaraz the past 2 years for many different reasons, but in snippets, he can make good runs and play well on faster hard courts. What improvements are necessary this season to challenge Sinner at the top of the fast hard game, and will the serve and backhand improvement help? Thank you. Love the channel. Don't think I've missed a video this year. Thank you. Backhand improvement will absolutely help, especially because it's harder to rush him off of that wing with the new technique. But overall, backhand effectiveness, as I've talked about, becomes a lot more important for Alcaraz in quicker conditions because he's not able to hit as many runarounds. So it's really key, especially against the Zverevs, Medvedevs, and Sinners of the world, who all at points in those rivalries have outplayed Alcaraz backhand to backhand, whether it be because they're more solid off of that wing or they have a penchant to burn him on the backhand down the line to kind of take advantage of the runaround bias. All of them at points have beaten Alcaraz backhand to backhand. You don't see it nearly as much on clay, because there are so many ways for Carlos to either pattern change down the line with the backhand or hit a higher heavy one to break up the rhythm and find a forehand on the next ball. And those options just aren't as readily available on the quicker surfaces. So the backhand improvement is huge. Of course, the serve improvement is huge if we're talking about better server conditions where he has the ability to hopefully go a little bit more toe-to-toe with the players who are getting so much out of their serves. So, yeah, I think those are probably the two keys. But also, he needs to manage, he would be the first to admit this. He hasn't always managed his fatigue levels and his level of freshness and just psychological well-being in the second half of the season, as well as he's usually fared in the first half of the season. So a lot of it is that as well. From ManQ, hi Gil, here's a rapid-fire question for you. Now that Bublik is a back-to-back champion on clay, what benefits does his game receive on the surface previously believed to be his worst? As always, love the insight. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Well, two things. He craves time on his forehand, and he's a masterful practitioner of the drop shot. And those two things are aided by clay. I will also say he's playing heavier on the forehand, more topspin on the forehand, way more than he used to hit, especially with heavy acceleration. And that's getting his ball to be even more effective on the clay. That said, I think I said this on Monday Match Analysis last week. I don't really look at those two titles as evidence that Bublik has become great on clay. I just take it more so as evidence that he has become a more reliable player as a whole. And both of those events were at high altitude where his serve is highly effective, and he only played one top 100 player. And Bublik is just at a level right now where if you put him in altitude clay against players outside the top 100, I expect him to win right now. He's really just stabilized things. He's very confident in what he's doing out there, and that to me is the main difference. Although there are some aspects of his game that do make sense for clay, especially if he's embracing the movement aspects of it, which have hurt him in the past. From Jacob. Hi, Gil, love the content. Do you think non-Sincaraz tennis is becoming too boring? I've been pretty underwhelmed by the Canada Open. On one hand, the quality, example Ruud Hachinov and Rune Popper in round of 16s, were riddled with unforced errors. On the other, watchability, the next best, Fritz, Z-Man, Shelton. Who's Z-Man? Who's Z-Man? Anyway, hit big but don't display much artistry. I love how Demon creatively makes up for his lack of power, but he's a rarity. I don't see a Delpo Berdych or Roddick Ferrer type battle right now. The type of non-Big Three match you could relish in the Big Three era. Look, I don't know if this is true. That's kind of up for other people to decide. And you can comment if you agree with this or not. If you're feeling underwhelmed by the sort of tier 2, tier 3 players right now, that they're not exactly getting you excited. It could be true. It could be. And it sometimes does feel that way right now. What I will say is, if it is true, I don't think it's about quality of play. I think everybody is training harder than ever. They have more information than ever. We know how the game has evolved and changed due to technology and other factors like that. It doesn't necessarily make the game better, but it certainly means that, everybody is performing right now at a very high level. I'm not worried about that. What I would be worried about, what I think is really important, is that you don't feel sameness. I think that's so essential. Ferrer felt very different. Roddick felt very different. The play style was distinct. The personality was very distinct. I think quirkiness, Del Potro had a lot of stuff going on. He had one of the most beloved single shots in his forehand. Like, I think it is almost that shot alone has its own fan base. I think it's important that there's quirkiness in tennis. And as soon as everybody starts getting very samey, starts playing the same way, which I feel like we've been nudging towards dangerously. I don't know what the antidote to that is. But that's what I think could really be a problem. All right. This is somewhat related. From Carl. Hey, Gill, love your mailbag vids. I don't know if you'll ever do a video on this because every newbie is going to ask you to compare Sincaraz to the Big Three, but I wish you'd just point out some simple facts on why we cannot compare eras. The biggest point being, all technology has evolved, whether it's sports science, nutrition, ball material, court surface, shoes, and most importantly, racket and string. Technology has changed the way the game is played, even versus the Big Three era. Rogers Pro Staff 97 from 10 years ago is 340 grams. Wilson Shift 2023 is 315 grams, 10% lighter. And yet I hit at least 10% harder and faster with the new racket, which enables even more efficient swing path for myself. Give Sinner and Alcaraz a Pro Staff 85. Let's see them beat Pete Sampras with that. It's impossible to use. Well, they would figure it out. They would play completely differently, and they would figure it out. They would have developed differently. Where I think, and I'm with you on this point, where I think this is most evident, and it's so easy to forget this aspect, watch Federer in 2002. Roger Federer looks like a 90s player. He looks like a 90s player. Watch him in the 2010s, he looks like a 2010s player. You can't even reduce, and it's really the same thing for Djokovic. Look at Djokovic, and he looks kind of like a 2010s player if you look at him in 2011. Look at him in 2023, he looks like a 2020s player. There are subtle differences. You're not going to get enormous differences over a 10-year stretch, especially because there hasn't been any technological revolution that really matches up to that of wooden rackets to aluminum to carbon fiber, or natural gut strings to polyester strings. There hasn't been that extreme technological revolution. But even so, there have been those subtle shifts in the game, even in the last couple 10-year periods, that have been real. And not only can you see them based on when a player was born, you can even see them within players who were talented enough and hung around long enough to play through those eras, such as the big three. So that's why, like, people on the last mailbag, for example, somebody asked me, if you put ball striking into an algorithm, would Sinner come out on top? And I said, yes, I think he would. And then I made sure to point out, look, there's a lot of other aspects to tennis other than putting ball striking into an algorithm that we're taking away movement, we're taking away the variety and the craftiness that comes with doing certain other things on the court. We're taking away the defensive aspect of scrambling. We're taking away serving. We're taking away all of these things that matter in tennis. And if you take away all those things, reduce ball striking to an algorithm, yes, I think Sinner would come out as the greatest ever. But what also is part of that conversation is you're never going to have anybody from too long ago have any chance in that conversation. There's no way, if the algorithm doesn't care about adjusting for era, they're not winning on spin, speed, ball placement, and consistency. They're not winning because the ball striking is at a higher level right now than it ever has been. So while it can be fun to compare eras in a way that feels intellectual, it's certainly not interesting or worth our time to compare eras in a way that purposely pits greatness or talent level against each other. Like, that aspect of it just doesn't make any sense to do. And then here's a very similar comment, so we can run through it quickly. It's from another member, Hai Jun. Hi, Gill. I've seen a lot of people claim that Alcaraz and Sinner would stand no chance against the big three at their peak, pointing to the fact that 38-year-old Djokovic recently beat Alcaraz and that Alcaraz beats Sinner many times. That logic doesn't sit right with me for two reasons. One, today's Djokovic isn't simply a weaker version of his prime self. He's a different player. His serve, attacking forehand, slice, drop shot, and net play have all improved, even if other areas have declined. As a result, certain matchups like Novak versus Wawrinka might favor this older Novak more than the younger one. 2. Tennis is full of upsets. Performance fluctuates from match to match. A handful of results, such as Novak's wins at the 2023 ATP Finals or 2024 Olympic Final, don't prove that Alcaraz or Sinner couldn't beat the big three in their prime. On a given day, even Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic in their prime could lose to today's Novak if they're slightly off. Yeah, a lot to unpack in here. At the end of the day, I'm with you in both areas. Djokovic has evolved. So to argue that him having success against Carlos Alcaraz in his early 20s is proof that he would have just blitzed Carlos in 2015, again, for all, and part of it goes back to what I just talked about for the last comment. It's just such a flawed point. It's such a flawed way of thinking. But it's very impressive that Djokovic, it's a flawed way of thinking, although let's not also lose sight of the fact that Novak evolving the way he has is worthy of great admiration and praise. That in itself has been a feat. The fact that he's been able to improve all these things to the point and modernize his game as his career has gone on, that is incredible. But to use that to diminish Alcaraz, that's where you start to go completely off base. And I think your second point is that, yeah, like all of these guys are greats who in their own ways have dominated the game. Carlos for a lot less time than Djokovic did because of where he's at in his career. But when you have great players, when you have tier 1 players, they're both at a similar level. They're going to beat up on each other. It's going to go a couple different ways. It's not all going to go the same direction. That is absolutely true. So for that reason, I too am dubious of, obviously I'm dubious of this claim that Sinner and Alcaraz would get waxed by the prime big three as if their ability level and talent levels don't hold a candle. No, I don't subscribe to that at all. I don't. Madonna. I feel like Arthur Fils is really underrated when talking about talented youngsters. To me, the ball striking is similar to Fonseca, but he moves so much better than him. Does he have any weaknesses that are holding him back that I'm just not seeing? Well, his weakness is putting the ball in the court. That's what has held him back. You're right. It's not at any point limitations when it comes to athleticism because he moves so well. He hits really big off of both wings. Sometimes his serve hasn't been a great weapon, but it's big enough where I wouldn't say that the serve is a weakness. I don't think that's held him back. So yeah, he hits huge and he moves great. That's such an awesome foundation. I agree that he's really underrated when talking about the talented youngsters, but the main thing that's held him back is his ability to put the ball inside the lines consistently. He's awesome, though. He's great. He's well on his way to being a top 10 player. From Nikhil's. Hey, Gil, what are your thoughts on Joao Fonseca losing in round 1 of Toronto to a player outside the top 100? In the first set, he was barely able to make returns. It was shocking to see, especially after his good performance at Wimbledon. Do you think the pressure of the media and Brazilian fans getting to him, or do you think he just needs to improve his return game and conditioning? I don't know. That was by far the worst I've ever seen Fonseca play. He was horrible in that match. So, shrug my shoulders. He's played 2 pretty awful matches. One of them I didn't see, though. I gather he played pretty badly in Estoril when he lost first round to... I'm forgetting who he lost to, but I gather that was a pretty rough one. But in all the matches that I've seen, this was by far the worst he's played. So I'm not going to make any big claims or draw any massive conclusions off of one match where he was just really bad. We don't know what's going on. And that's why, the reason why it's not smart to look at one match and then to say, like, his return game is a gaping hole, or he needs to do this and this. We don't know what's going on with these people all the time. So things can happen off the court, physically, mentally, that can lead to just really weird outlier performances. Sometimes this happens on the good end as well, where somebody just has this incredible day. And that's why it's important not to, especially when it's an outlier performance, to not draw big conclusions. And to me, that was an outlier performance. He just didn't have it. He was terrible. And he didn't really make returns in the second set either. I think the unreturned percentage for Fonseca in this match was 70% for serves unreturned in the loss to Tristan Schoolkate, the Aussie. Schoolkate served great, though. No doubt about that. A little bit windy. One thing I will say, more of a pattern, I've seen Fonseca struggle in wind now a few times. So I think that's a footwork thing, positioning thing. Can try to just make sure to be more precise with his positioning in windy conditions. That's the only thing. Now, the reason I'm willing to say that is because it's not the first time I've seen that. If it were the first time, I'd shut my mouth. From Ashley. What does Medvedev need to do to get back to his winning ways? I miss the days of the hard court specialist. Look, I didn't think he was going to have a good year. I feel like the decline has been long-term enough and steady enough that you can just look at it like a decline. Like, it's not a blip. It's not a slump. It's not a rut. It's a decline, which is fine. And this is typical. The big three had maybe spoiled us when it comes to longevity. And maybe that's something that we start, not just the big three though, because that'll be the popular thing to say, oh, the big three spoiled us. What about Dimitrov? What about Ferrer? What about John Isner? There have been a lot of players in this era who have played their best tennis even in their 30s, and we start to get accustomed to it. But I don't think we're at the point where we should just assume that it's going to happen for everybody. And I think that Medvedev has declined physically. I think he has done his very best to adapt. Technical adjustments, tactical adjustments, equipment adjustments. He's throwing the kitchen sink out. Adaptation has been harder for him than it is for a lot of other guys. And I think that's because of his technique and some of the quirks that he has as a player. It's become harder for him to adapt to deal with the ways in which he's declined physically. What I would like to see him try to do, I think there's been too much change recently. I would like to see him start to stick to his guns a little bit more. Stop changing the equipment so drastically. Try to really commit to one way of playing. And try to build up the confidence again in what he's doing. Because right now, I just think it's gotten a little bit too panicky, honestly. There's also just some clutch factor, though, that's seemingly missing. There were points in the Popyrin match. It was a close match. He didn't play the big points well. He made bad mistakes on a lot of big points. And there used to be a time where he just didn't do that. It's gotten a lot worse than I thought it would ever be, though, for Medvedev. I didn't think he'd have a good year, but I didn't think it'd be this bad. From Merc Doggy, which player and on which surface do you think has the highest chance of winning a slam other than Sinner, Alcaraz, and Djokovic? Obviously, Ruud on clay has been really good at Masters 1000s, and he's been in some finals. So on paper, it might be him as far as who has kind of proven to be close on a consistent basis. That said, I gravitate towards players who might be able to make some gains. And I'd look at 2026 and think about players who could sort of enter the fold if they continue to improve on the trajectory that they're currently at. And to me, that's Jack Draper. And I know that the narrative around Draper isn't very positive right now because he was disappointing at Roland Garros and Wimbledon, and now he's been injured, so we won't see him turn up until the US Open. But that I will not allow that to cloud the improvement that Draper has made in 2025 that has been so obvious, that has made him for much of the year the fourth best player on tour, or the fifth, depending on how you want to evaluate Djokovic at slams versus at non-slams. I will not cloud that. And the logic behind that, the reason I would say Draper on a hard court is because, not that this is a given, but if he continues the same rate of improvement that I saw from 23 to 24 and then from 24 to 25, if he can continue to go up, he'll be there. He'll be there to a point where he can really challenge Sinner and Alcaraz. Maybe not be better than them, but to really challenge them. A couple of questions on the Shelton-Cobolli thing. Hi, Gill, long-time fan of the show. Congrats and keep it up. Was it me or did I notice Ben Shelton celebrating winning a point with a vamos? Generally speaking, where do we stand on players celebrating in a different language than their native one or English? I might have also heard non-Serbian/Slavs shouting Idemo. I guess it's kind of cool, but maybe a little bit silly. Well, usually you do that to piss off your opponent, let's be honest. There are some people who maybe are doing it not to be confrontational, not confrontational, but what's the word? Adversarial. Not even adversarial. There's a word that I think perfectly encapsulates doing that, and it's not coming to me right now. Yeah, anyway. Usually it's an intentional way in which you're trying to get in the head of whoever's across the net from you. That's how I would characterize that. I didn't hear Shelton do that, though, so I can't speak to the specifics of the circumstance. But the next one, maybe related, from Atish. What do you think about the Shelton-Cobolli altercation? I personally feel it was very unfair from Shelton when all Cobolli did was gesture like he does in most matches. Even after the match, when Cobolli confronted and things had cooled, Shelton continued to try to act tough. Here's where I struggle with talking about this. Clearly something happened at 1-love in the tiebreak, the third set tiebreak. Cobolli did something off camera because the camera was on Ben. They never showed what Cobolli did, but Ben, based on his reaction, was upset at whatever Cobolli did. I don't know what he did. This gesture that we're talking about, I know Cobolli alluded to it a couple of times, or Ben alluded to it a couple of times in the interaction, but I'm not 100% clear on what exactly Cobolli did. I think he might have done the eyes closed forehand gesture, which essentially means this guy's getting lucky, he's treeing, he's playing out of his mind. I think that might have been it. In which case I could see why Shelton at that point used that to say, oh yeah, then it's on. If we're going to play that game, then it's on. Now it's personal. At least until this match is over. It's personal until this match is over. I think Ben plays very well in those kinds of situations where he's playing with that emotional chip on his shoulder. And if he sees something across the other side of the net that gives him an invitation to enter that headspace, he is going to take it. Honestly, I don't have an issue with either of them in this case. I just think it's a really close, emotionally charged match where both of them probably did things in the moment that rightfully upset their opponents, their opposition. Because I think Ben said something verbally at the changeover after the initial Cobolli gesture. So this is fine. It's all good. That's really my take on it. From Amit. I know it's late, but I want to still talk about the Wimbledon final. I think the major takeaway was that Sinner improved the first serve, which led to his win, which is fine. But another underrated aspect was his urge to move forward and finish points either through his volleys or to put pressure on Alcaraz to come up with something great or force an error from him. In fact, he came in more than Alcaraz, which is shocking. I think this is a huge win from Sinner because I feel it's an important aspect of his game, which he has unlocked and which will lead to much more dominant performances. But was it the faster surface which gave him the confidence, or he changed his game plan for the good? Will it transpire to slower surfaces also? I think you meant transfer, but that's okay. Well, I agree. I thought that was the biggest change that Sinner made. A lot of what Sinner did to turn the tables against Alcaraz at Wimbledon was just to improve certain aspects of his execution. The amount at which he was coming forward was the only thing that I think he changed in terms of his actual tactical intention. And I do think it was a game plan thing. I wouldn't say he just did this because of the surface. No, part of this was if you serve well, if you return well, if you trade well and generate short balls, you have more opportunities to come in. Steve Flink and I talked about this after the Wimbledon final. I don't think Carlos was choosing to not come forward. I think he was not able to generate opportunities to come in as often as Sinner was. But I also think this was a nod from Jannik to Alcaraz's defense and his athleticism, his ability to turn points around, his ability to keep the ball low and play slice defense on the grass. I think Jannik was knowing that in order for him to maximize his efficiency in attack, he needed to bring more than power to the table. And this was one of my takeaways after Roland Garros, where he had a lot of points turned around on him. Yes, more points are going to be turned around on a slow surface like clay, but he had a lot of points turned around on him because he tried to blast a ground stroke through the baseline, and it wasn't enough. And in the Wimbledon final, he knew he had to do more, and part of doing more, the biggest part of doing more, was coming forward. And it's something that he has been working on that relentlessly for the last 2 years. And this was the biggest example, or at least the biggest stage in which it absolutely paid dividends. From Theo, hey Gil, I wanted to know if you think that Tsitsipas going back to his dad will result in the revival of his career. Goran said he thinks his dad is the only one that can coach him. Do you agree with this? And do you think Apostolos is a good coach for Stefanos? Thanks. It's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing with Goran. I trust Goran. He had the court level view of it, so to speak. He saw the dynamic firsthand. And ultimately, the takeaway here is this is not about coaching right now for Steph. This isn't about X's and O's or technique. This is about psychologically getting to a place where he is ready to put in the work distraction-free. That's what this is about right now. So Goran basically saying the whole dynamic and it just everything needs to get more cohesive off the court. And for that to happen, maybe it needs to be a reconciliation, a round two, hopefully with better working dynamics between Apostolos and Stefanos. And maybe if they can figure that out the right way, it can at least get Tsitsipas, despite whatever technical limitations Apostolos might have as a coach. If Stefanos can get to the point where he is feeling good on an emotional level again, that's going to be the biggest boon for his game right now. So I believe that that's true with Goran. And let's see how it goes. Look, ultimately, I'm not going back on what I said when the Goran partnership first began. I said, if this doesn't work, then that's a red flag, and it's symbolic of some larger issues right now for Stefanos. That's what I said at the time. I'm not going back on that, now that the worst case scenario has played out. Let's do a couple media questions. This one is from Tulo DC. Hi, Gil. The format of post-match interviews feels outdated and needs to be heavily reformed, in my opinion. Players are so much more likable and insightful when they appear on long-form interview or podcasts with hosts they respect and are comfortable with. Iga and Zverev are just the latest examples. Do you agree? And if so, how would you organize a player's media obligations to give fans the best content over the course of a tournament? It's just a matter of agents appreciating this to be true. And it's totally true. And do you know what it is? This isn't rocket science here. In order to gain insight, you need time and you need follow-ups. Those are the two ingredients for insight, for maximum insight, maximum rawness and honesty and thoroughness. You need time and you need follow-ups. It is so important that when a conversation topic is breached, that you're able to stay on it for some time and maybe dig deeper and maybe continue to kind of go different directions with it. That's not how a press conference works. The way a press conference works is every reporter gets one question. Some reporters may be working on their own stories that might have something to do with something completely different. Like, I'll just give you an example. If I am writing a piece for a media entity, and I am focusing on the quality of balls, of tennis balls in 2025. I might ask everybody about tennis balls in 2025. I might be a great reporter writing a great piece, and I'm doing nothing wrong. But when my piece is about the balls, and that person's piece is about the schedule, and that person's piece is about the match, and that person's piece is about this, and now we're in a press conference format where this isn't a real conversation, and yeah, it's not gonna be as good. That's not to say it's gonna be bad every time, right? Press conferences are not always bad, but it's not gonna be as good as a long form podcast. And I think that these long form interviews do so much to connect players with fans, and I just hope that agents and players start to recognize that more and more so that we can see more and more of this. All right, that'll do it for this week's mailbag. It'll be pretty interesting talking about the Toronto final. I will be in North Carolina, but I'll try to get that out as quickly as possible. Looking forward to it. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.